And I've got another good example of that where we had one of our partners, they ended up getting cybersecurity hacked, and so we could our partner we couldn't process payments because our partner was down. And then by the next week, we actually were up and running again, even though our partner was still unable to process. We were able to move to a secondary vendor in a very short amount of time. If your objective is to meet the outcome that we're doing, how you do it, I don't care. But if you use AI and use this, you can get there a lot quicker. We're still got a long ways to go on two things. We're not done modernizing the platform. We still have a lot of core libraries to upgrade. We still have a lot of third-party libraries that we need to replace that have been like called black box. No one's touched it in 10 years that has tentacles throughout the whole system. But those things are not as daunting as they used to be. Like new companies that are going to be formed, those companies are going to be consulting companies. They're going to hire up a ton of engineers, do something like I did, get them up to speed on how to use a Sage tool, like throw a code base in and then go modernize it or go create a new thing. I think you're going to see companies that specialize in that.
Awesome. Well, Cory, we really appreciate you jumping on, joining us on the podcast today. First thing I want to start out with is just hear how you got to your position today. How did you kind of get started into tech and just kind of walk us on that journey to your current role?
Yeah, so I started I came out of school with an electrical engineering degree, but wanted to get into computer science. So, got an opportunity to work for Accenture and kind of got my feet wet with good training and good software. Then moved on to enterprise software with Ariba, which was a really high flyer in the late '90s, early 2000s. And really, Craig Federighi was our CTO, who's now at Apple. So really got a strong background in software engineering, and then made the jump to big data. So I started to work for some of the biggest data aggregators in the world, right? LexisNexis, ChoicePoint, Equifax, and really kind of got that marrying of what the difference between being enterprise software and what was enterprise data, and how do you get into grid computing and learning systems, and how do you predict where somebody's going to be next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, and who are the top five people that they associate with that aren't their friends and family, right? And then kind of, built a reputation of building transformational on large companies. Got into automotive where we were streamlining the whole sales journey, the consumer sales journey on buying a car, buying cars online. So built a lot of software that allowed us to buy online. Kind of the first innovators in that when I was at Cox Automotive, Auto Trader, Kelly Blue Book. And then more recently, I've gone to some smaller companies to try to basically help them go from good to great, right? So it's companies that are, anywhere from 50 to 115 million dollars trying to get to a 300 million or a billion, right? So how do you bring all that experience together and teach a, group of folks that have done a lot of good work on how to scale what they've done so they can achieve the next phase of their companies.
Right. So you started out in electrical engineering, that was your main goal, and then made the shift to the software side of things. Was there an experience that made you want to make that shift? Any person that had an impact on that?
Yeah, so yeah, the switch came mainly because when I did all my job interviews, electrical engineering was going to be in kind of plants and manufacturing, and Accenture seemed very, at the time was Anderson Consulting, seemed much more interesting. You got to go to work with the Fortune 1000, Global 2000. You got to do software, which was kind of new. Client server was kind of coming out. Object-oriented programming was coming out. I had a friend of mine that was in computer science. And so it just seemed like a better first start to get a much broader group of how to be a technologist as well as a business person. So it seemed to have a really good program for that.
Great, awesome. What tools did you start out using with the software, and how do you do much hands-on software now? Like, have you noticed the vast change from when you started to how people, vibe code?
Well, yeah, and the vibe coding is interesting. That whole concept. I do. So I got into it. Was really a homegrown software package that Accenture had built to help with bringing enterprise software, but mo most of it was Java, C, C++, that kind of
Mhm.
technology is where I started out with. But um, I have not been hands-on for a long time until recently. So now I'm with these tools, these AI tools, I'm able to build and prototype and do things very, very quickly. So I'm a little bit more hands-on than I have been, but mostly for experimentation purposes and trying to help people understand how to write prompts and how to go from an idea to a plan to code to, do you use that? How do you validate that, AI is doing what it says it's supposed to be doing? And then how do you do it in a world where maybe it's a 20-year-old system that does a really good job, has a lot of industry traction, but needs to modernize quite a bit. Like how do you, it's not everything's green field. So how do you modernize an existing platform that has a lot of revenue tied to it without impacting, the next generation of products that you're trying to get to?
Definitely. Now, you did mention using AI to fill business needs as opposed to just using AI for the sake of AI. I'm curious, any apps that you vibe coded or anything you've done recently that has filled some of those needs?
Our company does a lot with patients' eligibility for their insurance. So you go into a doctor's office and you provide your insurance. One of the biggest things that practices deal with is rejected claims, where they come in and do a service. They send the claim to the insurance company, and the insurance company rejects it because it's not a valid claim.
Yeah.
So one of our things that we do is trying to match up the patient's insurance. Is it eligible with the provider, the doctor? Do they subscribe to, did they participate in that plan? So 10 years ago, there was one Aetna PPO plan and everybody had it. Now there's 300 different variations of that. And doctors a lot of times sign contracts that are long contracts. So they may not, be part of Aetna PPO plan A dot 3 dot 2, but they are part of something else. And so they come in, the practice doesn't know there's a disconnect. They provide the service and they have a rejected claim. So what we've built is an AI engine that basically takes all of the various different contracts that a doctor has with the payers, whether it's Aetna, Humana, United, whatever participation that they're doing, and make sure that we can keep up. Those rule sets change all the time, so we built an agentic way for practices to maintain that physician list of participation in insurance with their client, with their patient base, so that that's always up. And we've reduced the amount of so if there was $1 million in rejected claims that a practice has, we're cutting that out by 50%. So that's a
Wow.
huge ROI. And so that's something that, that we just, we have the existing systems. We loaded our stuff into an AI tool, that tool, and we started asking what are some agentic things that we can do. That popped up. We just kept evolving it. And the next thing you know, we're testing it with two of our best clients and we're getting really good results on it. So that was about a 3-month process to get started, and we're 3 months into implementing it with some customers.
It's great. It's amazing what we can do with AI that we weren't able to do 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
I did want to kind of see for your team, how are you encouraging them to utilize AI in their day-to-day operations as opposed to replacing them, but letting them get more done with AI?
Our platform's been in the market for 20 years. It's basically an integration engine to all the payers and the EHR systems and the systems that hospitals use. It interconnects all of that, and it's a layered app that sits on top that basically allows somebody to schedule an appointment, do all their pre-work, clinical intake, medical history forms online, come in to the office, check in, and then pay when they're done. And so we've automated that whole process mainly for specialty. And so the platform where its analog mode is the fact that we integrate to every EHR and every payer, and we've got 20 years worth of rules to determine whether somebody's insurance is eligible versus whether the doctor is participatory. So so with us it was scary because I've got a mixture of folks in Vietnam and a mixture of folks in the US here. I would not call them classically trained in engineering. They just started when early in the market and kind of became industry experts, but they're not great technologists. And so AI was scary to them because they were worried about if we bring it in, could they do it, right? And so they didn't. Initially we gave them a list of tools to use, and they were having a really hard time figuring out how to trust it, use it effectively because our tools or our platform is pretty complicated, and so they couldn't. It was just hard. So what I did to get them over the hump is we invested in a tool that sits on top of AI that basically profiled our entire code base. We basically trained that tool. It's called Sage, Sage AI Tech. It sits on top of Claude, and what it does is it allows you to it profiles your whole system and it tells you everything about your architecture. So all that old wiki stuff that's out of date, all your requirements that are out of date, it basically gives you a refreshed version of all of that. And then you're able to look through it, find out what's wrong, what Sage got incorrect, and then you train it. So we did that like 9 times. Once we did that, and then we handed it over to our engineers, I started with I brought in a ninja, somebody that was really experienced in AI and showed them how. Like here, like gave them a really hard task. The task was implementing SSO across a new set of platforms. And then that was going to be a 5 month project for one of our Scrum teams. We were able to get this ninja to get in there, never seeing our system, using Sage, and was able to within 6 weeks from basically they landed here in October. We got them a computer in November. By December 15th, we were in production. And they were able, my team was able to see what this person did using Sage. And then they go, oh, I can do that. And so then we challenged them with the project to use it for this new project that was going to take 12 months for a whole Scrum team to do it. Now they got it done in 3 months. And a lot of it was getting them over the hump on how to use it. That was the first step because they didn't know how they were trying to ride the bike and the motorcycle, but they just were struggling. They were going in circles, right? Now we gave them a destination. They got on the bike, and now they're really rocking and rolling. They're only really a quarter into it at this point. But I think having a tool that profiles your code base on top of an AI tool, and then having real life people helping your individuals learn how to use it. Now, even my most junior person is super proficient at it. And then the next thing was like, how do you get 5 people going from writing 100 lines of code to writing 10,000 lines of code, and how do you there's a whole SDLC thing that we probably should talk about at some point on how do you make that flow state completely, non-clunky.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that is amazing, Corey, what you've accomplished. And I want to go back to that whole life cycle because I have a bunch of questions about that. But let me not ask that question. Tell me about how the team reacted to this change, because this is like you probably have totally turned your development process around. What type of human leadership work did you have to do to get them firing on all cylinders?
There was a lot of resistance in the beginning, right? So trying to, there's some people that wanted to use Copilot, some wanted to use Cursor, some wanted to use Chat GPT or OpenAI, some wanted to use
Yeah.
no, actually nobody was looking at Claude.
Okay.
And so I let them kind of just experiment on their own, just to get dabble with it and let them do their own research and stuff. And then I said, okay, guys, what are we doing to either add value to the company or save expense? Like, are we getting faster, cheaper, smarter, better? Like, what are we doing? And there was a lot of things that were interesting that they were working on, but none of it added up to moving the company off. And so that was the first aha, like, okay, we having a tool that doesn't get us anywhere is not helpful.
Yeah.
So then once they had comfort with a tool, I basically said we have to use these tools to do this. And I basically had used the SSO project as a case study for this is your objective. Your objective is to meet the outcome that we're doing. How you do it, I don't care. But if you use AI and use this, you can get there a lot quicker. The last thing I did is I actually used one of my junior developers and really gave him some hands-on coaching. And when he was able to do it, then all the senior folks and all the other folks said, well, if he's doing it
Oh,
and outperforming. So I created a little bit of a champion challenge on that where we had monthly forums where people would come in and say, hey, I don't trust AI. Right. So they would come
mhm.
in and say, it's giving me the wrong answer. And then we'd have working sessions and be like, hey, how are you writing your prompts? Are you actually
Okay.
using Sage? Or are you using your own thing? And that self-realization where they were able to connect the dots themselves. So there was about a 3 month part where I let them kind of get to it. Then
Yes.
then I got them focused on a project, got one team, one person to win, then I got one team to win, and then it started to take off on its own.
So that ninja guy that you brought in, um, he was doing the SSO project,
Yeah.
and then were other people working with him on this, or was this was kind of a self-contained thing that he was doing?
No, he was part of the Scrum team working
Part
on
of it.
that
Okay.
feature for the quarter, um,
Gotcha.
and was providing daily stand-ups. And it was like, okay, I got to this point, and people started going, "How did you get to that point?" Right?
Right. Okay.
Doing cool. Then he did sprint demos. He's like, they were like, "Oh my gosh!" And then they start asking questions, and then when somebody would ask him a question like, how are you handling this?" He didn't have the answer, so he went into Sage and said, "How would I handle this?" And it spit it out, and he goes, "This is how I'd handle it." Right? That must have
Okay.
been weeks of work, but
Okay.
by having those live demos and having the team actually watch him do that, and then we did some tech talks where that came in as well, and that was helpful. But and then that person was also available for when people had questions, that they could come to that person. We've got about 20 Scrum teams, so I've added three ninjas to help be the bridge to get everybody going. Because one of the challenges I had is we're in the last year of an equity partnership hold, so we're trying to get ready to exit, and we're trying to get our EBITDA down. So we don't want to spend a lot of extra money that we don't have to. We had to get more efficient, and this
Right.
is how we did it.
When we talked earlier, you talked about having all of this code base that was, well, it was documented, but it was out of date, right? As
Tribal
all,
knowledge.
yeah, yes, lots of tribal knowledge. And then, when you brought the sage in, it was able to figure out what you really had,
Yep,
right? And completely create all the kinds of articles that you would artifacts that you would normally create, right?
that's right.
The flow diagrams, the architecture diagrams, the logic, all of that kind of stuff. Tell me about what that did for your team understanding what what the company actually had.
Yeah, so I have a really strong organically built product leader. So she'd been with the company from she was like employee two. So she knew all about a lot, right? And so there was a situation where and we've got some engineers. I mean, most of them are within the last 2 or 3 years, so they don't have the history of the platform. And so a lot of times she would say, "This is how the thing works," right? And so what it did is so they would typically go down a certain path only to find out that is no longer true, and
Okay.
they would waste a lot of time, but they weren't allowed to still miss, like they still had to catch up, they had to figure it out and then work harder to do it.
Yes.
Now on that front end process, they can validate the statements that is or is not true. Like,
Yes.
hey, our system does this. Well, no, here it doesn't. It does this now. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, it used to do that, right? So
Yes.
what it's done is done two things. It's allowed our engineers who are relatively new get up to speed on 20 years of what I would call doing, applications that weren't like Salesforce built from the ground up a certain way with, world-class engineers. It was like 20 years of doing one good thing at a time. So you end up with this awesome platform, but it's not necessarily easy to understand. And there's a lot of duplication of code and rules and all that kind of stuff. So it's really sometimes overly complex. This demystifies that for them. Because our system is hard to understand because you're integrating to 45 different EHRs and payers and we're doing billions of transactions a day. Um, it's very hard to understand how that all works. What would happen is our client support people and our operations folks would constantly be coming back into product and engineering to get simple questions asked. How do I configure this? This isn't working. How do I figure that out? And so it was creating a 30% drag on the time of the team because they had to support all of these questions because big customers need to know things very quickly. We had a turnaround time by by rolling this tool out to the client operations, the account managers, the salespeople, we have cut down on almost 100% of what I would call questions that the product team used to have to deal with, no
Okay.
longer have to deal with. And so that we talk about flow state. That
Right. Yeah.
doesn't work if you have to stop every, 2 or 3 times a day to answer a question from a tech support person or a client support person about how something works or doesn't work. Now they have Sage in their hands. Just ask the question. It tells them the answer. It allows you to ask very simple questions about your platform specifically, and it tells you the answer, and it's right, 9 out of 10 times. And it's always putting you in the right direction, even if it's not 100% complete.
Let's spend time talking about the benefits that you've gotten from this whole approach. You've listed a few of them already. You reduced the number of customer support tickets, right? You now have are able to better understand the code so that you're able to do work faster, right? Instead of, asking your product leader, oh, how did we build that thing? Well, I think we did this 5 years ago, right? You can actually see what is in the code today, right? And that cuts your development time. And
Do you want me to show you some of the things visually?
yeah,
Let,
that
let, let-
sounds great.
here's an example of an output that Sage does for us, right? So it went through and created literally all of our documentation for our platform, right? So if you're technical, you've got the application architecture. So it gives you explanations all about it. You get these graphs. These are real time. So if we change the code and this changes, this graph changes.
Mm,
You can get in there and you can see how things interact. And so it's very simple as far as understanding the tool. We've got things that are actually like I was telling you, insurance and eligibility. Like if you know nothing about that and you come into us, you can come in here and get, well, what's a clearinghouse? Here's a clearinghouse, and it describes how it works. It even shows you interaction diagrams. Um, from this has a little bit more of a, I would say, a product engineering feel to it, but we
hmm
got it also generates these awesome graphs here that's a little bit higher level for our tech support people so that can talk about. So this is our patient journey, and it tells you it's got interactive diagrams that allows us to come in here and look at what's happening. This one is the one I like the best because this is like a product view. So we have a patient persona over here. It gives you a little bit of information, and then it tells you about the patient journey from how do we do communication with patients? How do we do the pre-registration on a mobile? How do we move from mobile to kiosk? What are all the different things that you do? And these are all like this is based on the code that's in the system. If you're technical, this is one where we did this is styles and stacks, right? So whenever you're talking to somebody, well, what's your technology stack, right? You can click on the data layer. It tells you exactly how many databases you have, what's going on. You can look at your tech stack. So all this stuff would have taken, you could if you took your best people and you spent 6 months, you wouldn't get this level of granularity. And then the moment that you were done, it would be considered obsolete and you'd have to go redo it in a year or two. And so it's just really powerful, some of the things that we're doing with it. And it's all about enabling somebody to go to understand the system that they're having to change and then giving them a lot better leg up on how to plan for that change and then if they're really good, they'll actually use Claude and Sage to actually generate the code so that you don't so that you move um, from writing code 80% of the time to now you're writing code 20% of the time and you're evaluating code 80% of the time.
Wow. I mean, that blows me away, right? I mean, that would have been really useful like
The
20
day.
years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago when I was doing all that stuff. Wow. Good stuff, Cory.
Corey, how long did that? I know you said you ran it through Sage about 9 times, and I'm sure it varies per size of organization. But out of curiosity, roughly how long did each of those scans take to pull that kind of information?
Yeah, so we started it around end of September. It went through, it took about 48 hours to go through the initial run. But it went through 12 million lines of code, right?
Wow.
And then came back. An MCP file came back out of it. I gave that to my architects and they went through and just kind of read through it. It was like a 20-page document. We went through it and said, yes, no, yep, that's right, that's not right. Here's what that is. And then we ran it through again. And we did that exercise 9 times. This every time we ran it, it got faster. So now if we want to rerun this cycle, it runs in about 30 minutes. And so every time, but basically once a week, we rerun the model so that it picks up the code changes from that particular sprint, and then we go. So that happened in September. By end of October, that's when we brought in the Ninja and said, "Hey, we have this project. We have to get it done by June of next year, which is when the team says that's going to work on it, do it. Can you use this tool and tell me how long it's going to take? I could take you through how it went through and looked through all the code. It looked and found all the places that we were doing authentication. Then it figured out all the places, and it turned out, it goes, oh, you actually have SSO with Duo, or you have SSO with Okta, but it's not the right one. You're not using Auth0, you're using the other one, and you've got this Duo thing, which is a multi-factor authentication. You have to deal with that. Then you said, well, how would you deal with it? And it came back with a plan. And then it said, then he goes, well, tell me the code files I need to change. Boom. And then they went into Claude Code and actually made the change, right? Now I would say that got it 80% of the way there. There was 20% of the nuances that you have to do to massage it, but it sped up. One Scrum team for 5 months is a lot longer than one person for 6 weeks, even if the tool didn't do everything, right?
Course.
But it did a lot for it. And I've got another good example of that where we had one of our partners, they ended up getting cybersecurity hacked, and so our partner we couldn't process payments because our partner was down. And so we used Sage to basically, we found that out on a Wednesday. By Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we had used Sage to basically create the plan for how we could connect to a different payment processor. And then we handed it to the offshore team. And then by Friday, they had a working prototype. And then by the next week, we actually were up and running again, even though our partner was still unable to process. We were able to move to a secondary vendor in a very short amount of time. But that would have been a much longer process if we hadn't had Sage. The reason why we were able to do it, and this is a point that I think people miss, it's part of our DNA and everything that we do in our SDLC process. It's not something where we're just using a one-off Claude to go do stuff. It's part of our SDLC, and it goes from engineering to pull request reviews to QA, and now even our product team is all of the requirements coming in are all been written by AI in a format that actually AI can then help code better.
And talk to us more about that life cycle. You were starting to lay out your software development process, and how is AI infused in each stage of the process?
When you're using these tools to actually do it, instead of a single developer working on a single story, you got one developer working on a whole feature, in some cases a whole epic, right? Now, if you multiply
Hmm.
that times four, now you have all these code collision issues where they're working in their own sandboxes to develop, and then you got to merge all this stuff together. And so you go from reviewing, hundreds of lines of code for for a peer review pull request to now we're talking like this one we did this last week. It was 20,000 lines of code across six repos. That would have been a really hard thing unless you were an expert in the tool to be able to go through quickly. And so you ended up bottlenecking in the pull request process. So what we did is we actually built an agentic AI that does the initial assessment of it. And we don't use Claude. We actually use OpenAI for that.
Mm.
Because I want one AI to audit the other API AI tool, right? And most of the time Claude is right, but it took us a while to get there. But we have a way to do 80% of the pull request reviews through an agentic AI bot, right? And then the bottleneck became the QA team, right? So we had to really change the way we did QA. So now QA is working with AI to produce all the test scripts. So it's actually our manual testers that are actually using it the most because they understand the functionality of what needs to happen. And then the detailed automation is coming from an automatic AI process that we built. And so that way our QA team doesn't get bottlenecked with trying to QA all these things, right? It's forced us to change the way we do automation from traditional ways of doing it, and making it much more um, feature based and functional based, and pushing a lot of the work into the engineers to do all the test driven development that they need to
Yeah,
do.
and are you using the AI as well to do
Yeah,
automated testing as well?
yeah, we're using
Mm.
Claude and Sage partnered with Playwright, right,
Okay.
to do it. And then when the manual testers create their initial, like when it creates their, like when they're going through the tool and recording
Hmm.
everything, it's creating all those automated tests in the background. And so
Hmm.
they only have to do it once, right? And
Wow.
and then they have to tweak it over time. And then but it's something that the maintenance of those things are much easier to do because AI is actually, when something new comes in, it's updating it and everything else it needs to that's dependent on it automatically. We're
Mm.
still got a long ways to go on two things. We're not done modernizing the platform. We still have a lot of core libraries to upgrade. We still have a lot of third-party libraries that we need to replace that have been like called black box. No one's touched it in 10 years that has tentacles throughout the whole system. But those things are not as daunting as they used to be. Like my team used to be really afraid of going into certain parts of the system because if you change this thing in New York, then something blows up in China, right? And so
Yeah, yeah,
at the whole whack-a-mole problem. And so now they're less worried about that because the AI can go cover that quicker for them, and they can write things that actually make those issues pop sooner in the development cycle, so they're not
yes,
finding it in production.
yeah, yeah. And then let's take a step back a second and go way back to the beginning of the process.
Okay.
So you talked about the requirements process and using AI to drive the requirements, and then that would also be able to feed the development process by giving the development process better requirements.
I've never known a team in my career that had a really good thing. It was always like four bullet points and go build it, and it shouldn't take you that long, right? And then you may have some good product folks that knew how to break things down, but it was still really difficult because those product people didn't have the engineering background, and so it was always a problem. So I always said engineers had to fill in that gap. What's happening now, because we do have Sage, we have product managers that I honestly thought were never going to get how to write epic feature stories. AI knows how to do that consistently. It knows what a feature epic story is. And so when you give it stuff, it basically generates everything in the right context at the right level. It'll take a bullet pointed, hey, I want to build. A good example would be we had no experience in doing voice AI in our scheduling app, right? So we had a call center app, so call center people could schedule an appointment. We had a self-service web app that patients could schedule an appointment. But then what people wanted was a voice AI agent that basically would say, "Hey, I don't want it to go to the call center first. I want it to go to the voice AI agent." That's a really hot thing right now across a lot of stuff. Automotive, healthcare, everybody's trying to figure out how to use voice AI to bring the vision of getting rid of unnecessary calls in your call center and keeping your call center costs down. And so we had no background in any of that. Our product manager that and scheduling had no background in that. And so we gave her Sage, which also allowed her to get to the internet and basically start with what are the first call types should we automate? Came back, call confirmations, reschedules, cancels. Okay, then she said, "Hey, can you build a set of epics and features on that?" Oh, sure. Because I mean, this is like IVR, right? So cool.
Yeah.
It created all that stuff. All right, what are the key test criteria? Boom. Okay, can you put that into Azure DevOps for me? Right? So when she showed up to quarterly planning, the team was flabbergasted. They were like, it went from we don't know what she ever wants to oh my gosh, we know exactly what we need to do. There's a lot of work here. So and so it really took really smart and she was a really smart product person, but how do you translate that into something that an engineer can do? That is a hard skill if you didn't
Yes.
grow up in a software company where that was the core discipline, right? If you're
Yes.
a telco or a bank, you hear about it, scaled agile, you take a class, you get certified, but how to put it into practice at speed, right? Because like this, I mean, we didn't even come up with the concept of a product of voice AI until January, and we're now live with the beta customer in March, right? So it's that that would not have happened because there would have been a whole bunch of discovery back and forth with the product and engineering teams to figure out how to fill in that gap. So it simply has made standardizing the way our requirements come in, standardizing how we take requirements into engineering, how engineering turns it into code, how we review that code, and then how we test that code was a series of wickets that we went through. And I didn't try to avoid hitting the roadblocks, right? I just let them hit the roadblock and then said, okay, let's how are we going to deal with that, right? If, things that I wanted to have done, our repos are now consolidated. Why? Because it's easier to have consolidated repos to do some of the stuff that it is to have 400 microservice repos that it starts to force really good behavior because otherwise you're just bottlenecking.
Corey, I'm curious. I'm sure you guys deal with a lot of PII, and then of course you have all of your business information as well. Putting them through these different AI tools like Claude and Sage, what procedures, security protocols, whatever in place to ensure that all of that information is not being taken and used to train other AI models?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. First and foremost, I've got Bible to have a strong background in security. So I think the first thing we did before we brought Sage in or before we brought any of these things in is that we had a really strong AI policy and structure, and we didn't allow people to just buy their own tools. Right now, we couldn't prevent what they were doing at home, but it was very clear in the policy and stuff that. So we started with a education process of this, and we actually went through a couple of. We brought in some scenarios from real world articles about what happened to companies that did this. Right. So the second thing we did is made sure none of our proprietary information was on the internet, right? So if you want to, if you, there's a lot of things going on right now where APIs are public, and what people are doing are reverse engineering those APIs and stealing intellectual property, and catching up on years worth of experience by just leveraging what's out there. So I think security is a super important thing for your employees, for your websites, putting everything behind firewalls and some sort of authentication mechanism is critical for all that stuff, right? I think also as far as like having your own enterprise instance that's walled off from the general, I don't use the free services, use the enterprise licensing, stick with the big ones, right? Microsoft, Anthropic, those kind of things. And then I've got I everywhere I go, I have a really strong security person that's been there, done that. That's basically making sure that we're building our security infrastructure in a way that prevents what I would call, the low-hanging fruit issues that you would have. So we built a security posture of going from level 1 to level 6 in a security model, and we just constantly improve that over time, making sure that our external, like our pen tests and all those things are solid. And then now we're working on internal threats that come from if somebody were to get penetrated. Everything's two-factor authentication, everything's coming through a VPN. So I think security has to be, you can't do this naively. And you need help. If you don't know how to do it and you don't have somebody on your staff to do it, that should be one of your first hires is somebody that knows how to set up your policies, read through the contracts with your AI vendors, make sure you're on the right instance, make sure you have the right privacy policies. And for us, you mentioned PHI, that's nuclear data, right? So there's jail time with HIPAA if you don't do things right. And so we do a lot to make sure that we protect our patients and our clients' data with the best and latest versions of security policies and practices.
Also want to get your opinion. Of course, that Sage AI tool is really neat, especially all that it can pull. So there's some very strong AI tools and software out there currently. With as in depth in the AI realm that you are, what do you kind of envision coming from AI in, say, 3 to 5 years? What type of problems do you think will be solved? Tools that we have, even maybe potential uh, issues with AI in 3 to 5 years. Kind of what are you envisioning?
Tyler, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, it is rapidly, like every version of Claude that comes out is better. So I think it's unknown. Here's what I do think is going to happen. I think there's going to be new companies that are going to be formed. Those companies are going to be consulting companies. They're going to hire up a ton of engineers, train what do something like I did, get them up to speed on how to use a Sage tool, like throw a code base in and then go modernize it or go create a new thing. I think you're going to see companies that specialize in that. I know the partner that we have with Sage, they're already doing that. I think they're going to partner up with the private equities. They're going to partner up with enterprise companies because it's going to be how do you get the SDLC process in, and no longer are you hindered by tribal knowledge. Like you don't need to know about. I mean, you don't like. I could probably turn both of you guys into experts in what we do in less than 6 weeks, probably less than a month. And so that barrier to understanding whatever the current state is in the business problem, the business model where it's going, is so much easier now. I just don't know what's like I don't know what's going to happen, but I look at I think I would not be surprised if there's what Netflix did, the Blockbuster. Is there somebody going to do that to Amazon? Or is that, or what's going to be the industry that gets taken over that no one thought could happen? I just think it's going to be really interesting to see. But I do think that what I'm doing that may be cutting edge will become very common, if not already, in the next 3 to 6 months. Like I think what I've done is not super hard to do. It was way easier. But I think there's going to be best practices coming out that show that, and people are going to adopt it, and it's going to be hard to predict.
Yeah. So, Cory, what's one common misconception about AI driven development that you'd like to address?
I think the number one thing is that, and I see this is that, you know, having AI, like I see a lot of folks talk about their products and services having AI. I think if those products and services are not being deployed in a way that's actually solving problems, I hear people say, "Hey, I'm AI enabled," but really, what AI is going to do is just make existing processes better. And where are those? If you look at a business, if you look at a business and what it solves for an industry or for a group of clients, um, there are obvious things that humans do that agentic AI could take over. And I think that's that's where people need to focus is like solving the business problem using AI, not I just put AI onto my tool, right? I'm using AI on this. Like it's got to be used to solve a real life problem, and it won't be for everything, right? It'll be for the things that are human replaceable.
Would you mind sharing the story with us about how your CEO uses AI?
Yeah. So I recently our we had a recently one of our CEOs left for another opportunity, and our new CEO came in, and he's very seasoned product-based CEO, and we were trying to we wanted to go spin up something. He goes, well, we were saying oh, it's going to take about 6 months, and he goes, I don't understand. Well, like this should only take a few weeks, right? But what he didn't understand is that our system is not an application. It's really an eventing system. Our whole platform takes events from EHRs, payers, and it's real time, right? And it can come in through the way the healthcare system works is these clearinghouses and these gateways and stuff. Like whenever a change happens in a third party system, it then communicates that out to all of the subscribers that are out there. Well, we have to subscribe to everything. So we get four, five, six different transactions that come in for the same exact thing that we have to sort out on our end so that we're not creating bottlenecks in our system. And there's no standardization. So what company A does is client A does is completely different with client B, even though they're using the exact same technology, same EHR, same version. They've built a ton of custom stuff behind it. So, long story short, I gave him Sage and I said, why don't you ask Sage why it's hard to do what you're asking? And he put it into the tool and it came back with a board level answer. And he goes, oh, he goes, so I don't ever get those questions more about why it's hard. What I get is that, hey, can Sage help it go faster? And it's just pretty interesting. And where he's using it is as he's trying to figure out what new products and services we need to double down on. He's using Sage to figure out like which one is going to be the most easy for this platform for this team to go do, and he's prioritizing what we work on as a strategic plan based on highest value opportunity with our clients, highest revenue or lowest cost. So it's helping him really help with the strategic planning process on what's the highest value thing to go after.
Is there anything at all, Corey, that we haven't covered yet that you would like to speak on?
Well, yeah, there's one diagram like this is probably the simplest diagram I can show. So, you know, wh- it's really hard when you have a really complex system to put something on a page. What are all the things in our stack that has to happen and how does everything interact to each other? And so we asked it to create our third party integration value streams, right? So this would have taken my architects forever to do, right? But this Sage came in really quickly and created all of our channels that we have. What's our core platform? What are our inbound integrations? What are our outbound integrations? What are all the third parties that we're going to? What do we have in our data layer? And then what about reporting and analytics? So it's just it's taking things that would have taken us a long time to produce and that would be stale and makes everything evergreen. So I don't know, I'm trying to figure out visualizations that bring what I'm trying to say to reality, and hopefully it's bridging the gap of what used to be hard is now super easy.
So, what career advice would you give to someone who's, just starting out and aspire aspires to be a CTO like yourself? And tell me about what you would recommend to that person.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that somebody starting out in computer science or in computers is like AI is going to be, no longer do you need the engineers. And so I think that's a fallacy. I think software engineers at any level are going to be needed, and they're going to end up going into these companies that I was talking about that are going to specialize and teach people how to do it. But if you're new now, I would start with using these tools to build things. Come up with something that you need to do in your schoolwork or in your own life, and start building things using these tools, right? Start to become a learner of an entrepreneur. How do I solve business problems? Bob, this is no different. Like every person that ever built a company or anybody that ever worked at a company, they're solving business problems, and they're solving business problems around one of two things. They're answering questions about people, or should I give this person a credit report? Should I authenticate this person? Is this a patient? Do they have the right insurance? You're answering questions about people, and you're answering questions about businesses, right? And so, if I was young, I would be looking at anything and everything that's out there that I deal with on a daily basis personally, and trying to figure out, can I make that better by building something that solves that problem, right? So if it's your, classwork schedule, right? Say you're somebody that you're not good at keeping track of your time. You can use these tools to manage your schedule, manage your day, alert you on things, and just start figuring out how can I get more efficient with my own day, and build stuff. And then as a student, and then eventually look for any opportunity to work at a company that will hire, and then bring these tools in to do that. So I think it's going to be just playing around with the tools on an everyday basis. Like I was trying to fix a light switch the other day and do some electrical work. I used Sage to go figure that out. My wife was trying to figure out what was wrong with the car. She used Claude to figure that out. So I think it's just using the tools, and then getting a plan, and then figuring out how to generate, an application that can help manage that. And I think the more that you can become an entrepreneur to solve problems, I think the better. Or the other thing is get into plumbing, electrical, or something that requires manual that AI is not going to take on.
And AI could probably help you with that too, in terms of learning that, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cory, thank you very much. Really great work that you've done at Clearwave and really innovative concepts. I still think you're ahead of the game from a lot of the people that I've talked to, but you're right. People can close in fast with the changes that are happening now. It's really an amazing time to be alive and to be in the technology space.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. I really appreciate the time. I enjoy talking about what we've done, and really proud of the team, and glad you guys are doing this to get the word out. So thank you.
Bob, that was a very insightful podcast with Cory. It was great hearing about the AI tool Sage and what he was able to accomplish in just a few months. What did you think of the podcast?
Yeah, amazing story. It seems like he's really transformed his development team and development life cycle. And I think a lot of technology leaders are going to be interested in hearing how he's used AI to really transform that business. So why don't we get into it now?
I agree. Let's go.